You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. Hey, y'all. Welcome to our MPL Live session. I'm Daniel, half of the equation from the Modern People Leader. You'll meet Steven here in a second. If this is your first time with us, we're so happy that you're here. And if you're a longtime listener of the show, welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about something that we feel like is way overdue for a rework, and that's leave management. So we're going to be talking about what's broken, what's outdated, and what actually works in the real world. And we've got an incredible lineup for today. We've got folks from Tilt, Bereave, CoLab, and Parentaly. But before we get into the session, we want to kick things off with our favorite MPL tradition, which is good news stories. So if you've listened to the show, you'll be very familiar with this. We all share a personal or work-related story from the last week or so. It could be something personal, it could be something work-related. And since there are a few of us on here, I'm happy to go first. And so my good news is that we're 2.5 weeks out from the due date of my first kiddo. Her name's going to be Lena. And so, yeah, wanted to keep it on theme today. But yeah, I'm super excited, and she could be here any day now. And to keep it going, I'm going to pick on Jen to go next.
Congratulations. You have an army of resources here to help you in the next couple of weeks. So you'll have
I
to
really
put
do.
out.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple pieces of good news. One, personal or professional. We launched a really exciting partnership with Paycor yesterday, and we just love that team so much. So I'm really proud of my team and the work that went into that launch. And personal, I am the mother of a 13-year-old son, which is a wild world of preteen drama. But he had a personal record and a track meet yesterday, and I'm just so stinking proud of him. He's going through all the things that we do as 13-year-olds, and it's fun to watch him coming into his own. So yeah, proud mama moment. Should I popcorn? Justin.
Yes, popcorn.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for being here, first of all. But second, good news. My boss granted me the time off tomorrow afternoon, so I get to take our 8 and 5-year-old sons camping for the first time. I found out that a bunch of the families that we're going with rented RVs. We're in a tent. Let's go. It's going to rain. Let's have some fun all weekend long, I guess.
That's awesome. That sounds fun to me, but that's like my wife's worst nightmare.
It might be mine.
Okay. Allison, you want to go next?
Fun fact, I have never gone camping, and my husband is bound and determined to change that. My good news story is my second grade son he goes to Chinese immersion school. It's a public school, but he just learned how to read in English. We don't know how. We have not taught him, but so I guess that's a win, is that we didn't have to do anything and he somehow learned. And he's now obsessed with reading. And so every night he asks if we can read silently next to each other, which is literally my dream come true, because I love reading and I don't like reading little kid books. So I am basically living my ideal life now.
That's awesome. Jessica, you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll stay with this theme. I have 3-month-olds, and my parents just got in town from Texas. So my good news is that parents to the rescue. Okay, they will be here for a week, and they have the twins right now. So I don't have a baby on my chest. So I'm living my dream life over here with my parents watching my children.
The part that she left out is she has 2 sets of twins,
I do.
all under the age of
all
18
of the
months?
ages. So
Right?
4 kids
Under
under
the age
2.
of 2. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So parents to the rescue.
Oh my goodness, does that leave me? I think that leaves me. So I have 2 pieces of good news, and then we'll get to the session. First, my personal good news, we officially have a venue for our wedding, which has been stressing a lot of people out because the wedding is July 6th, so in Costa Rica, and turns out we will be able to have our ceremony in the cloud forest like we wanted to, which is my dream setting. So we're super excited about that. My second piece of work good news is MPL Build. So we launched our first kind of direct to audience product, and it's called Build, and that is a content partnership with Jessica Zvon, who wrote Built for People. And it's a Substack that is entirely EX. EX is a product focused. And we're number 11. We launched last week and we're number 11 on Substack's list of fastest growing business newsletters, which is just like mind blowing. So that's my work good news. Super exciting. And super excited about our session like right now. This is quickly becoming my favorite type of podcast that we do, or session. And so I want to jump into today's topic, which is leave management and, what's broken. What are the emerging solutions for the modern people leader? And so I want to start today, and we're just going to jump right in. There's a lot that we want to cover today. We've got like an all-star panel for this conversation. And so I want to start with hard truth, and that is leave management is messy. And it's, in my experience, it's often viewed as a compliance headache or something, an administrative part of HR that no one looks forward to. It can be problematic. So, there's ripple effects into, some of the issues that you can run into. And that's where I want to start. And so to kick things off, Allison and Jessica, let's talk about what's broken. And I'm going to pick on you, Allison, to start us off.
No pressure. Yeah, I find this space, obviously I'm biased because I live and breathe the leave of absence space, specifically parental leave. But I think when you take a step back and look at the leave of absence space, it's so challenging for a variety of reasons. And I kind of view this as there are three big buckets of challenges. The first, as you mentioned, is the compliance, filing, pay side of things, which is, it's almost obvious why that is so critical. You have to do it as a company. It is something that if you do it wrong, there's all of this legal compliance risk. It's also really important, obviously, to employees to make sure that they get paid when they should get paid. So it's incredibly important. And it's also really hard to get right. There are different laws across different states, different ways of structuring this with different types of insurance and whatnot. So that is one huge challenge within the leave space. But then there are these other challenges that come after that. So in my view, and what I've seen a lot of companies look at this problem is they have to tackle that first bucket first, and it's really hard to get right. But then there are these other two buckets. And the second one I would say is sort of the business continuity and career continuity bucket, which is really where I live and breathe every single day. So, okay, great. We've figured out a system or brought in a vendor to like Tilt to support that filing and leave experience. But now we've got to figure out managers who say, well, how am I supposed to deliver when I'm one or two people down? And the sales rep who says, well, what do I do with my prospects? Who's going to take over my deals? How will I be paid for these deals while, I'm out on leave? So it becomes more of like this business problem at that stage to figure out what in the world do we do now that we've nailed sort of like the logistical side of pay and policy of like, how does this actually work in practice? And then there's this third bucket, which is what is happening at home that maybe isn't directly related to work, but is actually very much impacting the way that you show up at work. So whether that is lack of childcare, if you're returning from parental leave, or you don't have backup care, these are things that historically it's been sort of like, well, that's the home life thing, right? But it is actually very related to the employee experience and how they show up for work. And I think what makes these three buckets really interesting or challenging, the way, depending on your attitude towards if this is fun or exciting types of challenges, who should be involved in the solutions? The first bucket is fairly clear. Yes, that is absolutely HR's mandate to figure that out. The second and the third become really interesting because I think everyone can relate to the fact that like HR can do the best job on the planet, but if your manager was awful to you or said the wrong thing or excluded you from something, it almost doesn't matter what HR did, right? And so this is where this gets really interesting because all three of these buckets matter and they're also owned by different people or many people all at once. And so I think where this conversation today gets really interesting is what can HR do? What should they be doing? Because even if they're not necessarily responsible for that third bucket of, what happens at home or the second bucket, there are a lot of different things that HR leaders can do to support the rest of the company in creating that environment that is most supportive.
We've had a lot of chief people officers come onto the show. And if there's one thing that they have in common, it's that they run their org their way. I think of people like Crystal Boyson at Sprout Social, who completely rethought performance reviews for her company, ditched long form questions, created 3 clear ratings, which they then can auto calculate into a final rating. I think of Carmel Galvin from Clavio, who ditched the generic way of measuring quality of hire and built a custom framework tailored to each team. I think of Jessica Zvan, who tracks LTV to ECAC to evaluate every single manager. Like, these are the exact kinds of people leaders who wish they had a tool like ChartHop. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ChartHop, ChartHop is a flexible people ops platform and HRIS that brings in all of your people and business data into one place. So think, HRIS plus having the ability to bring in data from places like Salesforce. And they let you customize key processes like headcount planning, compensation, performance, and engagement exactly the way that you want it. No rigid templates, no one-size-fits-all playbook, just the flexibility to build the systems that you truly believe in. With ChartHop, you can really run your org your way. If their platform sounds like something that you want to learn more about, I highly recommend that you go request a demo. Just go to charthop.com and make sure to let them know that we sent you.
Love that. All great points. Jessica, that's a perfect segue also. Jessica, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so I want to give context that I've personally been through 2 leaves. I'm actually currently still on parental leave until mid-May. And then I've also, as an HR exec, I've administered leave. So I'm coming at this from 2 sides, but I definitely think nowadays coverage needs to feel like you are being supported. So it needs to feel supportive. If you're just doing the compliance part of this, where it's just, this is your paperwork, this is what you do, people are not receptive to that right now. Like, they want to feel like you care. And so the flexibility, feeling empathetic, like they can actually talk to you, that is non-negotiable now. I feel like in the beginning of my career about 12 years ago, it really was just send you the documents. You send me back the documents, leave, good luck, let me know when you're coming back. Whereas now that's not the case. People want to have conversations. They want to feel like you're invested in them actually coming back, because they're juggling caregiving or mental health or whatever is going on in their real life. It's bigger than approve this leave and then just come back to work. And so thinking about it as like a whole, like bring your whole self to work, this is a whole person experience. It's not just here's your leave and come back whenever you're ready. And so the policies need to feel like there is more to it than just the paperwork. So even just having a conversation with somebody, and I feel like a lot of times HR practitioners, we get this stamp on us of like, it's reactive instead of being proactive. And so kind of getting ahead of things, like what is something that someone needs? A lot of times when I'm administering leave, I will tell someone like, let me know and let's have an interactive conversation about it. And I want you to feel like I'm basically holding your hand the whole way through. No matter what you're going through, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to be there. I'm going to follow up with you. You let me know how much you want me to be involved, and I will take your lead on that. And to listen more and assume less. So don't make an assumption. So let's talk about parental leave. I'm on parental leave right now. Don't make an assumption that I don't want you to contact me at all. Like, I actually want to know what's going on. I don't want to come back to work and be overwhelmed. So just taking that as an example of like what is broken is like people want to feel like you're invested and that it's not just the compliance paperwork side of it. And I think a lot of people miss that. Even if you just start there and you get the paperwork right, that's one thing, but like it's the rest of it too, because if not, people feel very much slighted nowadays if they don't feel like you see them as a whole person.
Oh my God. I love that framing. Leave should be approached as a whole person experience. I mean, it certainly wasn't the way it was handled, way back in the day when I experienced it personally, but it makes complete sense. And so, Jen, I know you've seen the operational side of things up close through your client partnerships. And so share with us like what's happening on the ground. What are some of the things, the recent things that you've been seeing with your clients?
I don't think Allison and Jessica could have painted the table any more accurately. It is exactly right on to what we see with our HR business partners and our payroll teams. And I would add that every single day there's more complexity put on their plate because this leave space is so dynamic. So they are having to grapple with what was a paid leave law in California last month potentially has changed. And the bar of knowledge retention has become, in my opinion, completely untenable for anyone in the HR profession to have in their head anymore. And so our heart really goes out to our HR partners to have to navigate an increasingly complex and increasingly convoluted and ultimately fear-inducing landscape as they're trying to do what they do best. I love to Jessica's point, which is be an awesome human and be there for the human parts of leave. So that's where, there's no better application for technology, in our opinion, than to automate the automatable. This is a largely, as you've heard, compliance-rich space that needs a bunch of logic put behind it. And there's tens of thousands of permutations of a leave. So let's automate that so that humans can come to the forefront and be supported through any number of constructions of leave. And at the heart of it, and I want to amplify the message from Jessica, it is a solution of one. Solutions of many or peanut butter spread just simply does not work anymore. So any type of orientation around that is just falling on its face. It really, truly is so personal, so personal.
There was a comment, and as we were talking, and we don't have time to dissect this right now, but it's regarding the manager-employee relationship, how important that is. So I'm just earmarking that so we can come back to that later, but we need to keep moving because there's still a lot that we want to cover. All great, great framing of the problems that companies are dealing with. And so, one of the things that people love about the modern people leader is that we're having real conversations, and it can be hard, especially within HR, to feel like you're getting not just a templatized, information that's repeating over and over. And so I want to call this is like the let's be real segment for me. And this is a safe space. And we all have war stories about, having someone we know having had a terrible experience, or companies just completely blowing the EX side of things. And so, Jessica and Justin, walk us through a couple of recent examples of what happens when leave management goes wrong. And I'm going to ask Jessica to kick us off.
Yeah, so I want to preface this by saying that I have had amazing leave experiences. Like even my current leave, like it has just been so kind and so gracious, my team, but I should not be the exception. And I realize that I am the exception, and it actually like hurts my heart that most people don't have the experience that I'm having right now. A lot of people haven't experienced, like some examples that I have personally seen is someone goes on parental leave, but their manager continuously is just checking in or needs updates from them on their on things that are going on. So they didn't necessarily do any prep before they left. And so now things are hanging and they need them to check in frequently. And that's via text message, that's via Slack, that's like, can you jump on a call with me? And a baby screaming in the background, that doesn't feel good. So I've seen that happen. I've had someone be approved for intermittent leave. So this person had a medical situation where they needed to go to several doctor's appointments. So they were being approved for leaves. And they were scheduling these doctor's appointments to be take half a day situation. And then they were now seen as they're not committed enough. They're not committed enough because they are taking days off before all these medical appointments. But it was approved. And this is something that they are still getting their work done, but now they're not committed. And that was the feedback in performance reviews. And then when parents return and feel like their job has kind of been edged out of them, like other people have taken over a certain task and they're not giving those tasks back, or they feel like, why is it that when I came back, no one even acknowledged me, or, I wasn't really welcomed back. And so those are three examples that just hurt your culture because other people are seeing this. And so I, in those situations, I saw that and I knew this was before I had kids that oh, wow, that's going to be my experience. How am I going to feel when that happens to me? So not only is it happening to that one person, people are seeing it and then making decisions on if they want to stay at that company when they have to go through a leave experience. So it's much bigger than the one person, one experience, because everyone is seeing what's happening. And I actually chose to leave an organization because I knew when I wanted to have kids, that was not the place that I wanted to be when I was going to have my kids. So keep that in mind, because I made a decision to leave based on what I saw there.
It's so interesting. And what's coming up for me, Jessica, is that most, if not all of those are avoidable. These aren't super complex things that, couldn't have been prevented. And so interesting. So Justin, what do you have for us?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, so much of this is controllable. These are choices that we can make, okay? So if you're thinking about leave, if you're thinking about your policy, if you're thinking about how you support people, think about the choices that your organization can make. Kind of to Jessica's point about people leaving. Jessica left before she was going to have kids. We ran a poll at Bereave, and we're going to look at this through a little bit of a different lens than parental and talk about bereavement leave. But we ran a poll last year. About 500 people replied, and we asked one question, which was, if you've suffered a close loss, did you leave your employer within 12 months? 51% of those people said yes. And there are a lot of reasons that are controllable, that are not controllable. We can debate that all day. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of the people that we hear from were in situations that are controllable. One of them specific, and we've got thousands of awful stories. We've got some beautiful stories as well. But one of them specifically, a woman lost her husband. She was given 30 days by the executive team. And they kind of just said, hey, 30 days, like, go do you, don't pay attention, all the right things out of the gate. But when she came back, she had teammates asking her about her vacation. She had customers saying, I didn't realize your company offered sabbaticals. That's so cool. You must be so well rested. The communication breakdown after the policy was enacted was enough to drive her away from the business. So when you think about leave, you have to think about policy, you have to think about time off, but it's so much more than that. It's about support. And we really encourage folks to think about support versus that policy. Think about prepared managers, as Jamie mentioned, and trained managers, trained HR teams. Think about having a communication plan. Think about being organized. Have like a playbook or a framework or something, right? And then you have to nail the return to work, right? You have to consider, do people need a modified schedule? Do they need a modified workload? Do we need to change the way they're evaluated, to the point somebody made about salespeople, right? Do we need to adjust their quota and ramp them back in? Do we need to change from where they work, change where their work, physical work, right? All of those things are so, so critical. You can have a minimal policy. You can have a junk policy, right? But you still can connect the dots and help those people overcome that bad policy by having a strong manager, by having strong preparation and processes. And you can probably even come close to retaining that employee despite your bad policy. The compliance piece that was mentioned, right? I've been a part of creating half a dozen parental leaves as a sales leader, and I got so much of it wrong so early on. I learned a lot as a parent, but also we got to the point where we were a distributed workforce. We had a to-be mother in California, and we're in Indiana, and we spent dozens of hours, right? Dozens of hours trying to navigate that with a spreadsheet, and that did not go well. There was so much waste. We learned a lot, but there was so much waste that went into it, and we are so lucky that we nailed it. And she came back and said, hey, without that, if I would have had to go navigate who's going to pay me, when I'm getting paid, how I have to pull leave in versus the parental policy, it would have been a disaster. And she was very, very grateful and went on to become one of the top reps that we had.
Wow. I mean, it's honestly hard to listen to some of these stories. Like, it's just heartbreaking. And there's one in the comments. We have a little bit of time, so I'm going to open it up a little and just ask, let anyone reply that wants to. So Matt Trotsky, the one part I would fix is employees not knowing that they had a benefit available to them. Like, guys, it's 2025. How is that even possible that there are benefits? Companies are paying money for these benefits, and they're not only are they not being used, but people didn't know that they had these benefits available to them. That's just shocking to me. Like, anyone that wants to take this up, what are some of the things that you guys are saying that companies are doing, to avoid not only, the benefits questions, but we're going to get into, more detailed solutions. I'm just curious, is this normal? Maybe I'll reframe that question. Is this normal that employees do not know what they have entitled to them in terms of their leave benefits?
I'll take this and I'll say absolutely that's true. And one of the things that my team does is we do a Monday, did you know? And it's not specific to benefits, but we will literally say, did you know that you have this benefit? Did you know that we're doing XYZ? And we make it so that we are continuously putting things out there of did you know you have this? Because a lot of people, until they need it, they don't think about it. So for me, when I was interviewing at companies, I was very interested in their parental leave because I knew I wanted to have kids, but before before that, in my 20s, you would have asked me about the policy. I don't care. I'm not having any babies. You know what I mean? So I think it's very much like the season that people are in and reminding them. So that's one of the things that we do in a Slack channel. Like every Monday, you get an HR Did You Know? And it's about anything in the company, benefits included, because a lot of people do not know what's available to them.
I'll throw this out. One of our customers did this just to kind of go off of what Jessica's talking about. And I hadn't seen it until I got an email from them recently. All of their HR team, 15 people on their HR team, have in their signature a block of staff resources. Here's our EAP phone number. Here's the nurse triage phone number. Here's our benefits portal. Here's our employee HR portal. Here's Frontline. Here's grief resources through Bereave. Here's the wellness clinic number or link to schedule an appointment, and the benefit guide. All of those things are listed. And I was amazed to see that. And it feels like such an easy thing to do, to provide those every single time an HR person emails. But I mean, why stop there? Why not put it in the manager's signatures as well?
Oh, I love that. Can I build?
Yeah, please. We have time.
Question. The one addition I would make to those two really great points is we got to talk about our managers, right? Because the best and most incredible HR leaders in the world still need the partnership of those people leaders and managers, especially in the world of leave. Because as my fellow leave nerds on the call know, a leave qualifying event doesn't always come in the form of, hey, I need a leave. So managers have to be well-versed enough to notice and be educated to understand what looks and potentially qualifies for a leave event. And so that's even more of the onus on those that are working closest with their employees to know what that looks like and to ask the right questions, and then guide them to the benefits that the employer has.
We have a little more time. So I want to come back to something Anita posted around, gaining on-site childcare or discounted childcare, daycare, stipends. Childcare, it is shocking how challenging childcare and finding quality childcare and at an affordable price. I mean, it just seems like the costs have skyrocketed. And so I'm going to open it up. Like, what do we have for Anita on childcare?
I mean, I'll comment on this as somebody that's like in the childcare right now, is that I'll tell you a funny story, is that when I was first pregnant with my first set of twins, my girls, we went to see a daycare facility, and my girls at the time were 3 months old. So I had them, they're 3 months old. I was there visiting the facility with women that were still pregnant, and I had a breakdown because I realized that I was late. Like people were getting their kids on the wait list while they were still pregnant. And they had a list of kids, and they had like unborn children that were on the wait list. And so my daughters were going to have to be at the bottom. And mind you, I have twins, so it's going to be even harder to get them in. And I just remember feeling so overwhelmed. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, the childcare situation is overwhelming. I literally broke down and cried because I was like, I didn't know that I needed to get them on lists when I was pregnant. So I want to say that and acknowledge it. And then also say, like, reach out to your EAP, because that's actually what I ended up doing, because they actually had resources and like things that I hadn't thought about when it came to thinking about like, what could I do for childcare? So they actually introduced me to like a nanny agency where I was like able to do like nanny half of the week, and then they went to school a couple of days of the week. So I had to get creative when it came to childcare. So I say, think about outside of the box. Like maybe they can't go to a childcare facility 5 days a week. Like maybe you're going to have to supplement some of those things. And we were able to do that through using like our benefits card. Like that's how we were paying her. So think through, like, you might have to get creative, but just know, like I said, I literally sat in a parking lot and cried because I was like, how did I know that I needed to do this when I was 6 months pregnant? Like, who thinks about that?
I mean, yeah, it is, you're not going to catch everything. And that's the reality. And I know this through having a co-founder who is literally working on planning all the details, and with Daniel having a little one on the way. Sorry, Daniel, to bring your personal story into this, but there's just so many things involved. So I do want to move on to the next segment. And I feel like the next segment is really, we started getting into solutioning, but I feel like that's the hard part of the conversation. But it's also the most important. And for me, it's really where the rubber meets the road. Like we all have problems, the organizations we work in, there are challenges and that, but we can't stop. We have to find solutions. And so, for the next segment, I want to shift gears to solutioning, keep going down this path. If we know what's broken, what can we actually do about it? This is very similar to MPLs. If you listen to the Modern People Leader podcast, we do rapid fire questions. So this is a rapid fire segment. Each of you will give us one story, one lesson, and one actionable solution. These should be based on real world examples that you've run into, something that, that everyone could potentially take with us as an action. And so, Justin, you're kicking us off for this segment.
Yeah, thank you. So much time is trying to spend figuring out who gets how many days in bereavement based on relationships and trying to figure out this policy, but so little time is actually spent on that employee experience. And there's plenty of awful stories out there, like I mentioned, but I've got actually 3 quick hits that have meant the world to people that we've talked to that cost very little, if anything. 1, assign a buddy to somebody who is coming into the office for the first time since their leave. Just have somebody walk them in from the car, from the parking lot. Canceling the use of a conference room. A woman got some bad news in a conference room, and the executive said nobody books that conference room until she says it's okay when she comes back. And that conference room went unused for months until she gave the go-ahead. And we've got one company that actually sponsored a family to attend a retreat for the loss of a child, families that gather who have lost a child, and a company sponsored that. So back to like policy does not equal support. The human touch is so critical in helping, and Jessica painted the picture beautifully, but really helping hold people's hand all the way through, as she said, and really seeing the whole person, because it does impact the bottom line. Your P&L is impacted, retention is impacted. Train managers to lead a little bit with empathy and a whole lot of understanding what's available, and that human touch is gonna surface pretty quickly.
I got laid off in November 2022. And I just remember having so many mixed emotions. I was sad, I was embarrassed, but I was also relieved. One moment, asking my wife if I should quit my job and try to make MPL work. And the next day, that decision's being made for me. And, I'm lucky. Most people don't have a passion project to fall back on like the MPL. And it's terrifying and confusing trying to navigate your next steps after something like a layoff. And honestly, the outplacement services that were offered to me at the time felt pretty underwhelming. They didn't seem like they'd actually help. And I just remember feeling frustrated and a little bit bummed. I thought about asking for more support, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I realized that the leaders managing the process were just as overwhelmed and frustrated as I was. They were being asked to do more with less. They were handling these layoffs with little support or guidance, all while trying to protect the company's culture and take care of their people. And so that's why Career Sandwich's mission really hit home for me when I met them. It's not just another outplacement service. It's holistic transition support that helps both individuals and the people leaders who support them, giving everyone a little bit of peace of mind during a really crazy time like a layoff. And they do more than just help your alumni brush up on their resume. They help them tell their story, from figuring out who they are to defining where they want to go next. Career Sandwich helps them craft a narrative that really makes sense of the journey, and their platform is pretty sick. There's one-on-one coaching, there's group workshops, there's on-demand resources that are designed to help alumni really articulate their value, the story, and feel a little bit more confident about their next steps in a time that feels very uncertain. And so if you're an HR leader that's having to part ways with people from your team and need support, making this process as least crappy as it can possibly be, then I highly recommend checking out Career Sandwich. If you want to get in contact with their team, go to careersandwich.com/MPL. That's careersandwich.com/MPL.
Awesome. Well, we got to keep it rolling. Those were all great, Justin. Thank you. Jessica, you're up next.
Perfect. So I'll lean into this and actually kind of shout out to Allison and her company, because I used Parentaly when I went on leave. And one of the things that I think is really important is, like I've already talked about, when people go on leave and then their manager is continuing to ping them or to ask them questions, is like the prep before someone goes on leave, and then even asking them what they want and like what is it that that person wants and how do they want to be communicated with, how do they want to come back, because psychological safety matters. So making sure that people feel like psychologically safe. And then the policies don't mean anything if their manager isn't following them. So I want to reiterate that, like to the point before where Jen was like, your managers, like your managers, your managers, your managers. HR, you can have all the policies you want. If the manager is saying, we don't care what the policy says, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, the culture is going to flatline, because it does not matter what you write if it's not what you action. So train your managers and follow up with them on like, what are they actually doing? Because the just one question or like, let me just check in with you, if it doesn't stop, it's going to continue to be a problem. And then projects, like make sure you're reassigning projects, like give the person back what they left. I would have been devastated if I would have come back from parental leave and one of the major projects I was working on was taken away from me. I absolutely would have really crushed me. And so ask people, like, do you want this back? Do you want to help the person that was doing it while you were gone? Like reassign thing and like just create boundaries, because it's very important. And I think instability comes when you don't know where the boundaries are when you come back. You're already coming back. You don't feel like yourself most times when you come back. That's how I felt. I felt like a completely different person, because I was a different person. I was a mom. I came back with 2 babies. Then I came back with 4 babies. Like, you know, like I was a different person, and I needed those boundaries to be clear to me. And if they would not have been, I would have been on shaky ground.
That is going to be a hard one to follow up. Those are also great. Allison, that leaves you.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that is the most solvable for companies in my world is how you handle performance reviews. Because there's another piece to the parental leave experience that we haven't really touched on too much here, which is there is a real motherhood bias and fatherhood bonus that research shows exist. And that introduces another layer of complexity to this experience. And what's so fascinating to me is how often I see that companies have not even established a company policy for what happens if employees are gone on their leave of absence or their parental leave specifically during the performance review process. And there are some really easy ways to address this. Number one, you can encourage people to draft their self-review before they go on leave and ask their peers to draft their peer reviews as well. This is really, when you think about like ongoing career success of new parents, but especially mothers, that performance review could impact years and years into the future. And if you don't have it drafted beforehand, or if you say, we'll just skip it this time and we'll pick you up in the next round, that is so bad for them, because now this new parent comes back to work, they're rusty, they don't have context. Oh, wait, it just so happens to be the performance review process. So now all these people are reviewing them and they've only been back at work for 2 weeks. They can't even remember the great work they did before. So I would encourage people to think about, how are we going to handle performance reviews? And also you have to explicitly teach managers, how should I evaluate someone if they've been gone 6 months out of the 12-month period? Because managers sometimes, they may not be ill-intentioned, but they may rate them lower because they're like, I don't know, they were here 50% of the time, right? Well, no, like you probably don't want them to do that. And so you need to be really explicit about, think only about the 6 months they were here, rate that quality of work. And so that's like the biggest, I think, like quick win that companies can have. And then the other thing that I would really encourage everyone to do is encourage every manager to build a written re-onboarding plan when folks come back from any type of leave, but especially parental leave, for 2 reasons. Number one, most obvious, it's like very helpful to your business to have a written re-onboarding plan. But number 2, you wouldn't believe how employees feel. They're like, wow, you thought about this. You took the time to craft this written document to get me up to speed, as opposed to they walk back in like 30% of the time, nobody even knows it's their first day back. And you're like, oh, shoot, yeah, we need to catch you up on this thing. Like that feeling is awful, as opposed to they come back and you have a whole plan in place.
Oh my God. I love the concept of a written re-onboarding plan. Like, I think that would clear up so many of the problems that happen just naturally through this process. And so those were all great. Thank you. That was an excellent rapid fire. I want to unpack some of these. And Jen, I want to start with you, given all the experiences that you've had. And so, are any of these in particular relatable to you in the conversations as it relates to the conversations you're having?
Oh, 100%. And I think it's really important to speak to the facts of it has been statistically proven employees have a 10x assessment of their employer when a leave of absence happens. Now, that can be a 10x to the positive or the negative. So you essentially have the opportunity as an employer to create an employee for life and really edify that connective tissue. Or, as you've heard by some of my colleagues, and I'm sure in your lived experience, you've damaged an unrecoverable relationship, and that bell is not unringable. So I think all of these stories looked at through that lens really offer the perspective for an employer to give the attention and intentionality that leave deserves. And the ROI, I mean, it absolutely pays off to take that moment and pause and give leave. The parental leaves, yep, we see them everywhere, and that's the majority that we support. But there's also a whole variety of unexpected, unplanned, incredibly urgent, life-altering experiences that necessitate a leave. That's even more of a pressure cooker for the employer to be 10x better or 10x worse. So I really just encourage the HR and people leaders on the webinar to think about, slowing down, asking the questions, leaning in, and getting really personal when a leave happens.
Love it. We have a few more minutes, and so there are a couple of additional things that I want to. Again, I'm just going to open it up. I'm going off script here, guys. I hope that's okay. But it relates to what the comments we're getting, and so the first thing I'm hearing some themes as we progress through this conversation. One of the themes is the manager-employee relationship. And, that is something that Daniel and that's a theme that one of the all-time themes that we heard on a recurring basis on the Modern People Leader, just, across all topics, not just leave, is that relationship. And I have a belief, a hypothesis that investment in that, the manager tools to be successful with their employees is grossly underinvested. Like, there just isn't enough put in to help managers succeed in their jobs, which seem to be increasing over time. Like, the manager responsibilities, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. I've joked, it's like never been a worse time to be a manager. And so, with that said, if we can drill down into that a little bit more, like, what do companies typically do for managers, and what are, like, historically, what have they done to, like, help managers, and, like, what are the emerging practices? Like, what are the best practices here on really ramping things up for managers to help them be successful in these really tough situations, which can be. And I'll let you guys self-select.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So let's be honest, most managers are given no training. So the most managers, what happens is you are good at your job. So let's say you're an engineer, you're a great engineer. So then, of course, you move to the next level because you get more money in the next level. So one of the things that most companies nowadays are doing are saying, we're going to do individual contributor and we're going to do manager. So if you want to be a manager, then you become a manager, versus that's the only way to move up, or that's the only way to get more money. Because that's where the problem lies, is that some people don't actually want to be a manager. And so they get in these management roles and they have management responsibilities. They have to do things that are outside of their wheelhouse that they don't actually want to do, but they were put in situations that they had to do that to get more money. So that's like problem number one, is like, have people lead people that actually want to lead people. That would solve so much. And then the second part of it is the training. So I definitely think nowadays you need to train people before you give them other people to lead. Because a lot of times, I always say this on LinkedIn a lot, I learned how to be a manager from people that were not good managers to me. And that should not have to be the way that you learn. Like, I hope that my team would say something different. I hope that they would say they have learned how to lead and how to be empathetic and how to be a people leader because of the things that I did for them, not the things that I didn't do for them, because that's how I learned. And so I definitely think there's a gap there, in that a lot of these problems stem from the fact that some people don't actually want to manage people, and that should be okay.
I love that. And, I agree. It's good to hear what you said. And I've got to imagine that there are some low hanging ways of doing that, where you take your leave policy, you run it through ChatGPT, you get a summary in the format of like, repurpose this for, how a manager toolkit, and create a Zapier, a Zap that will, anytime your HRIS shifts, an employee or a manager has an employee that's on leave, send them this summary of the leave practices. I feel like there's got to be a way with AI to like guarantee that loop is being closed. But go ahead, Daniel.
And also something that Jessica mentioned earlier about how, for every person that goes on leave, the solution is going to be unique to their specific situation, and how, some people might not want to be communicated with that entire time they're on leave, whereas others, like Jessica, they want to stay in the loop. And so how do you train managers to create like these one-of-one solutions for their people?
Can I jump in on that real quick? Just because we see that all the time. People tell us all the time, like, you can't SOP grief. I disagree. The SOP isn't the things that you have to do. The SOP are the things that you should consider doing every single time. They might not fit everybody, and that's okay. But I use the example all the time. I lost an uncle in 2017. I was not close to my uncle. I went to the funeral and I came back the same day, right? I was focused on supporting my father, right? But after that, right, I know I went to high school with a kid whose uncle raised him, right? That same person is held from a policy perspective and treated the same way. But if you have an uncle that raised you, you probably need a lot more considerations than somebody like me who had a very lightweight relationship with that specific uncle, right? So thinking about the considerations, making it an equitable journey because you are making the right considerations every single time, does not mean you need to do the exact same thing for everybody, because that just wouldn't make sense.
And this
Totally.
is going to sound very self-serving to Justin, Jen, and me, because we all have businesses in this space. But I would also add to this that managers are being asked to do 1,000,001 things. And so, like, the idea that HR alone is going to be able to do this and support them, it doesn't work as well as when you work with a Bereave or a Tilt or a Parentaly. And I think a lot about this because since I only work on parental leave and the manager is so important, I think of it in a little bit of a different way, which is, how do we actually take a lot of the work off of the manager's shoulders? Because right now, if it's just manager and employee, they have to figure that out. And like, let's be real, the person going on leave because they're expanding their family, this is their number one priority. The manager, it's like number 19 on their list. It's never going to be number one. And so even good managers, like, they're just never going to spend all the time figuring out how to be an expert in handling this thing that happens once or twice every few years to them. And so how we think of it, and I would say this is probably, there are versions of this that are true for Bereave and Tilt as well, is like, okay, well, why don't we figure out, in the case of Parentaly, we introduce a career coach who's trained in the parental leave experience to work with the individual going through leave. And so that takes like 60% of the work away from the manager. And now it's actually even better because now they're working with this expert who's outside of the company. And then we only have to teach the managers the most important things that nobody else can do. And is it perfect? No, of course there are bad managers everywhere and they're going to make mistakes, but I love that point, Justin, that you made of like, there are choices that we make and there's a lot more that's in our control than I think we realize.
I have to build on this one. It's so, Allison, you stole a lot of the great points I wanted to make, but I would also reframe this as a what not to do, in that we have seen companies take the posture of risk aversion to the point of excluding the manager from a leave conversation, which is always damaging, always. And we get it, right? HR is trying to insulate the potential talking out of turn or communicating incorrect information, or worst case scenario, doing something illegally through the navigation of a leave. However, removing that people leader sends such a powerful detrimental message to that employee, and cutting that out quite literally and going straight to HR immediately reads unintentionally as a punitive, as a inconvenience, as a you get sidelined. It's just we've never seen that go well. So I would caution on the manager front to all the best practices that have been shared. 100% yes, managers are navigating all of the things. They do not do leave every day. Please don't expect them to know exactly the right thing. Please empower them to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to find out and I'm here to help, before trying to guess what the right thing is. But please think carefully if there's an orientation to exclude managers, because they absolutely play the most powerful role, in our opinion, on a successful leave.
I'll echo that. And I kind of have taken the idea that I think there is a massive unlock in all of the businesses trying to figure out how to grow, how to create more revenue, how to keep their customers, how to do all of those types of things. I believe if they spent 3x the amount of time, which is very little time that they spend right now, in manager training, teaching people how to be better people leaders, I think there's an unlock there, right? And I think there's a really good opportunity to create not just an amazing culture, but to compound an amazing business, to be able to hit next levels just by getting into that middle section of the business.
And so one last thing I want to touch on, and then we're gonna turn to Q&A, and that is there was a point made earlier. I believe Ashley made the point on compensation and not knowing anyone that has gone on leave that did not have some sort of compensation impact. And I'm paraphrasing, so Daniel, help me out if there's something there. There we go. And so let's talk about comp. We talked about performance, and there, Allison, you shared some great things and how to look at performance. There's a tie between performance and comp. And so I'm just curious the panel's thoughts on, I agree with this, whether you are in some case, worst case scenario, people are taking steps back, and, best case scenario, you're flat for it feels like you're being penalized even at flat. And so what are the norms, and what comments do you have on this?
I can say just from an HR perspective, so I'll give you two insights on this. So one, my own insight. When I first had my daughters, I actually didn't know anyone that was at my level. And at the time I was a senior vice president, I didn't know a single person that had gone on leave and came back at my level and ran an entire department. So that was something that I was hyper aware of. I had actually a lot of anxiety about how is this going to impact me? What's going to happen? So I had several conversations with my CEO about it, with my COO, who I reported to. So I want to just acknowledge that that is a real fear. I was absolutely terrified, what is going to happen, because I don't know anyone else that was at my level. And so those were conversations that I had. The second part of that is, after going through that, one of the things that when I came back, we were very intentional about, it's nice to have a policy, that's great. Have your policy say people get this much time off. But if you don't say specifically for sales, if you don't explain how that's going to impact quotas, how they're going to come back, what that means, then you're kind of missing the mark. Because I've actually had people say, I'm not actually going to take the leave because I'm scared that I'm going to miss XYZ mark. And this is especially relevant for fathers, or, not the primary caregiver that doesn't want to take leave. I've seen this way more in that situation where that person says, I'm not going to take the leave because XYZ. And so I always want to point that out, because it's not just quote unquote the mom or the primary caregiver, whoever that might be in the situation. A lot of times it impacts the secondary caregiver as well, because they choose not to take as much leave as they could because they don't want to be impacted negatively. So I think you have to look at your policies. Having just a time frame is one thing, but actually having, if you are in this role, this is what we're going to do, is completely different. And I think a lot of people miss that second step.
Any other comments from the panel?
I mean,
I could spend.
this is one of the
go
hardest
ahead.
things ever to figure out. Like I've actually never seen a sales comp plan for parental leave that was perfect. So I think that there's just like, think about the comp plan. I put a link into something I wrote. It's very complicated, depends on the role, the sales cycle, all of that stuff. But don't forget a ramp period. I think that's the piece is like companies are starting to think more about what is the sales comp plan and do we guarantee 80% OTE? And okay, well, what does that mean for the seller where their average sales cycle is 2 years and they actually hit 200% of quota while they're out? Now they're only being paid 80%. What is that doing to your top performer, right? Like it's so hard to build a really good sales comp plan. And then also you need to think about how do we ramp them back? Because for some organizations, they've done a pretty good job at like the sales comp plan, but then they completely forget the ramp period. Sorry, Justin, I totally interrupted you.
No, that was amazing. And so much of the challenge that I've been through in developing probably half a dozen of them for sales teams as a sales leader, and getting it wrong really early on with splits and all sorts of things that were just disastrous, right? And I could probably, talk for an hour on this topic, but you talked about that ramp period, right? You're bringing people back after 90, 120 days. So much has changed. You have to treat them like a new rep, right? That there are so many other things, looking back 12 months at rolling 12 months comp, right? Things like that can be really impactful, but they're always, to your point, Allison, like none of them are perfect, right? We did a 100% OTE on a 60-day sales cycle, which seemed all right, but our ACV was increasing. So one of the reps came back and said, hey, I've got this deal that's 4X our ACV, and you want me to hand it off. I realize I get paid 100%. Like that's perfect. That's great, but not quite perfect because what about that deal? Right? Like, how are we going to treat that? So it's not a perfect science, but if you kind of back up to understand what people need for clarity, what people need for comp, and how you're going to retain the people that you spent a ton of time competing on for talent, that's really what should drive that conversation.
Yeah, the only build, when in doubt, err on the side of employee favorable is typically the rule of thumb that we advocate for. Leaves go by fast. Retaining talent is incredibly cost effective when you do the analysis. And this is coming from an operator. I understand P&Ls inside and out, and I mean that intentionally. It is far more financially beneficial to be employee favorable and to give premium where you can.
All right, we're gonna open it up now. Daniel, sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, I feel like for somebody that's in sales, it's like, I mean, it's obviously very important to talk about comp structure, but what if it's somebody in an engineering role? Like I'm just thinking of somebody like my wife, who is a senior engineer and she's also a team lead. And I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of handoff process. Any tips for roles that are not commission based, and maybe some work is being handed off, and like how do you like set some clear expectations for everybody, or for people going on leave, that they're not going to lose the work that they owned before? Like, what does that process typically look like?
He's asking for a friend.
I don't know if I can answer that in like under an hour. No. So from a comp perspective, it's much more straightforward. And I think it actually goes back more to the performance review question. If you're asking more about, and what I mean by the comp is like, if there's an annual bonus, then like just make sure that it's being prorated down.
Well, like, I guess, yeah, I think that's a good place to start. So, for the performance reviews, there's always like some goals that she's striving to achieve, and some of them are a little more clear cut than others. And and for some of the more ambiguous ones, being an engineer, I'm not going to even try to like talk technically. I can just imagine her coming back 4 months later and no progress has been made on that goal because she's not working. And so, like, how do you get ahead of having that conversation?
This is
And I guess maybe it is during the
business,
performance.
because there isn't one right way. Every role is different. Every role needs different things. Some people can pause their entire role when they go on leave. Other people need to bring in an external backfill. It actually looks very different based on every person. Not only what is their role, but what are their career goals and what do they want to come back to? And when they come back, do they actually want the same things they thought before they went on leave? So I'm giving you a terrible cop-out answer of like, it depends, which I totally realize. But honestly, like if I were to boil it down to like planning, start early, 3 to 4 months before you go on leave. So much of this is controllable. It's never going to be perfect. And you should start from a place of being very vocal about what you want out of your career. That may change and that's fine, but assume that how you feel now and what you want when you return will be true, and build a coverage plan with that in mind. Make sure your boss knows, hey, I'm really gunning for this promotion. And so if this opportunity comes up while I'm on leave, I don't care when, if I'm 2 weeks into leave or 2 months into leave, send me a text and let me know. These are the types of things that like we all own our career, right? And like we need to be really vocal about what we want and what is important to us, and then being explicit. And this is why I'm such a fan of planning, because I think that when you write it down and you're really clear on what you want from your coverage team, you're going to have such a higher likelihood of getting it. But that's like the shortest answer to something that could take weeks and weeks to actually get a real solution.
No, I appreciate that. Anybody
I've
else
got
have any responses? Oh, Steve?
Yeah, I just want to move on just because so we can get like maybe one or two things snuck in before we wrap up. Jennifer made a point earlier. People just want to be treated like people and not have the stigma of using leave many times, which is a company provided benefit. And I think this came up, this was mentioned earlier in a slightly different way. Like, how do we begin to remove the negative stigmas associated with taking your leave benefits? Sorry if that's a basic question, but I do agree with this point. And some people are going to boldly take their leave because that's who they are. But a lot of people just don't want to rock the boat. And culturally, I was raised as someone, you don't question what you're being told. You don't, like, especially in a time like being out, like, mijo, you need to have a job when you're back. So I'm just curious what the perspective is there.
I kind of want to jump in here. So what I'll say is just a quick story is that when we had our first set of twins, my husband was working at a different law firm, and there they technically had 6 weeks, but no one there had taken more than 2 weeks. So put that in perspective. The policy said 6 weeks, but no one there that was a father had taken more than 2 weeks. And so when my husband said he was actually going to take the 2 weeks, it was kind of a like, are you sure? Like, you have some cases that are about to go to court. Like, how are you going to do this? And he actually got some pushback for that. So I want to acknowledge that, like, the penalty comes when when the standard is not what you're actually saying, So you say people have 6 weeks, but then you shame them when they take it. So I just want to say that, like, you can't have one thing written down and then enact something totally different and wonder why people don't take it. So I think that is actually an issue that comes up quite a lot of, like, what are people actually doing? And it needs to be modeled by leadership. So if your leadership team also that needs to go on leave is not actually doing it, then you're telling people that they shouldn't take it either.
Oh my God. I feel like we could keep going for another 30, 40 minutes, maybe hours. But we have 1 minute left, and we have one final tradition on the show, and it's something that we call one word close, one word or phrase. So it could be one word, it could be a few words, just anything that's coming to your mind as we close out the call. And Steven, since you're familiar with this, I'm going to pick on you. What do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to go with hope. I feel like that things are changing for the better with respect. The fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that there's so much interest, our audience joining us, thank you so much. But I'm going with hope.
Jessica, what do you got?
I'm going to go with compassion. I think the way to do this is to be compassionate, and that means a lot of different things to different people. But when I think about leave and the experience that I've had, which has been very positive, people were compassionate with me.
Allison?
Motivated. I think anytime you get these people in a room talking about this and see the chat, it just motivates us so much to do better and keep talking about this really important topic.
Justin?
Preparation. So much can happen if you just sit down and think through it and talk to some of the people who have been through it, and put a plan together.
Jen?
Revolution. It's time. Let's change this for the long haul. We got to do better for our kids. So it's time.
And I'm going to steal Matt Trotsky's. I'm going to say managers. And that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for joining the session. Huge shout out to Tilt and Jen and the whole team for this conversation. And if you want to go deeper, there's actually an ebook that's coming out from Tilt here pretty soon. And so if you want early access, comment in the chat with early, and we'll make sure that you get it. And with that, I think it's time to close out. Bye, guys.
Everyone. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.